Recording this. Okay, so a quick recap again. One way of reading this is who said that you have to add time to Kodesh times. The other way is who said that you must, right? Who said that I can make turn Friday into Shabbat, or give Kedushat Shabbat unto Friday would probably be a better description. Or how do we know that we're expected to? Now, when you talk about B'chalisha v'katzil tishbot, clearly, we're not talking about giving Kedusha of Shemitah to the previous year, as we said, because the ramification of this Kedusha presents itself at different times, right? Some things have to be done 3 months in advance, some need to be 6 weeks in advance. So clearly we're not talking about an objective Kedusha that begins in the 6th year. We're talking about adhering to Dinei Shemitah a bit earlier, right? The second half here, that's Rabbi Akiva's limud, Rabbi Shmuel's limud, this is closer to what we talk about, but here too we're talking about adherence to Yom Kippur before Yom Kippur. Now we can talk about the Kedusha of Yom Kippur, Adrabah. The Pashtut of the Pasuk, if you want to read it like that, is that Batish'ah, you already have to think of as Yom Kippur. In other words, we're used to thinking of Yom Kippur as on Yud Tishrei, wrong. Yom Kippur starts on Tet Tishrei. Now, quite late in the day, half an hour before the end of the day or something, but it very much could sound like a time frame. Having said that, I want to present just the Rambam. What I proposed in the Rambam, according to the Magid Mishnah, is that the whole Gemara is only talking about things that make the Kedusha time more effective. Right, adhering to Shemitah, if you're still plowing right before Shemitah, that's not really very useful, because you're still going to benefit from your land on Shemitah if you do that. Same goes for reaping the field after Shemitah. You're reaping you're sowing the seeds of Shemitah, so you're still benefiting from the Shemitah. That seems to be the Rambam's take, and I propose that Yom Kippur would be the same. You can't start fasting when you can't. I'd say differently. You can't bench at Shkia, because then it's not that you're fasting at Shkia. You just happen to finish your Suda Shkia. That shouldn't really count. That's the way the Rambam, I think, read the Gemara. How did Tosfot read the Gemara? Tosfot, I think, read the Gemara as follows. Tosfot said, the question is, how do we know that you can add time? How do you know that it's effective, it works, that adding time works? And the answer is, you see that you have to adhere to these things, right, to Shemitah, to Yom Kippur, before they begin. And as the Gemara says at the end, the Shabbos as well. So the Rambam will say the Shabbos is just an asmachta, it's not a real limud. But Tosfot seems to say it is a real limud. And the question is, how do we know that such a thing means anything? Keeping Shabbos on Friday, does it mean anything? And the answer is yes. The fact that Torah expects you to do it proves that it means something. And then we'll have two separate questions. One is, from what point must you keep Shabbat? And the other is, from what point on Friday may you turn and impose the Kedusha of Shabbat on? So those are the two ways of reading the Gemara, two extreme ways, I'd say, the Tosfot and the Rambam. Because you can read it in a more powerful way and say, wow, Rabbi Akiva's limud about Chodesh HaKatzir is one thing, the limud from Yom Kippur is a different thing, or whatever. Again, we should find it troubling if we think Rabbi Akiva is answering one question and Rabbi Shmuel is answering a different question, because the Gemara seems to say that they're answering the same question. So that should bother us, right? That's why it makes sense. The Rambam would try to say, no, we're only talking about the same kind of thing. Tosfot too say we're talking about the same kind of thing. The question is, what kind of thing? Now you might say, wait, hold on. Who said that Tosfot are referring necessarily strictly to, who said Tosfot are answering the question of from when can you add? Or is it possible to add the Kedusha of Shabbat to the previous day? Who said that to us? How do we know that's true? So I'll prove it from what comes up later on. We'll prove it from the next part. Let's skip to here, just so we could prove this. The Gemara in Brachot Kaf Zayin says, Amar Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel, I'm over here, at the bottom page 5 in the Hebrew pages. The English pages, of course, have a slightly different order. If you're saying that we're not up to here, so, oh, yes, okay. Sorry, just making it easier. I think that's a bit too much. Is that okay? Okay. Amar Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel, מתפלל אדם של שבת בערב שבת ואומר קדושה על הכוס והלכת הכבתי. So the Gemara says, you could daven the Shabbos davening on Friday, and you also can also say Kiddush on Friday. Now, this would imply that the Kedusha of Shabbos can appear on Friday. The question of can you daven Ma'ariv during the day is probably something you all know about, especially the Chutz La'aretz people. It's far more prevalent in Chutz La'aretz to do early Shabbat. But the truth is also during the week you can have early. You can daven Ma'ariv early. I think in terms of the lighting now, but I realized that in terms of lighting we're probably better off like this, right? It's probably better. So this answers the question of when you have Shabbos early, is it really Shabbat? Is it truly Shabbat when you have Shabbos early? So Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel says, yeah, it's truly Shabbat in two senses at least. One is you can daven Ma'ariv and also Shel Shabbat. And it's not only a matter of davening Ma'ariv, it's a matter of davening the Shabbos davening. Could you daven the Shabbos davening on Friday? Or not, right? You can only daven the Shabbos davening on Shabbos. Unless you turn Friday into Shabbos, in which case you can daven the Shabbos davening on Friday. That's number one. Number two, Kiddush. Kiddush is something that's uniquely Shabbos's, right? You can't Yotzei Kiddush on Friday. You have to Mekadesh Shabbat, right? You have to bless Hashem who blesses Shabbat, right? Who bless Hashem who sanctifies Shabbat. So first you have to accept the sanctity of Shabbat before that. Now, the interesting thing is what the Or Zarua says about this. The Or Zarua says the following. הקשר רבי יעקב דקרובי לקדוש, הואיל שתוספת שבת וימים טובים לפניהם דרבנן, מעתה האח אנו מקדשים קידוש שבת ואוכלים מבעוד יום. Now, you might say, well, that's what we do. We make Kiddush before, maybe we're doing it wrong. Nope, it says it in the Gemara. בפרק תפילת השחר, אמר רב יהודה אמר שמואל, מתפלל אדם של שבת בערב שבת ואומר קדושה על הכוס. מעתה איך נקדש ונסעד סעודת שבת מבעוד יום שאינו שבת, כי אם דרבנן, ונצא ידי חובת קידוש סעודת שבת גמורה שהיא דאורייתא. There's a Shiur d'oraisa, we're going to learn 3 more Shiurim. Shiur d'oraisa to make Kiddush on Shabbos, and you're making Kiddush on Friday. How does that work? Does it work? Now, it can only work if Tosefet Shabbat is d'oraisa. That's what he claims. It can only work if Tosefet Shabbat is d'oraisa. He says, נראה לי לפרש של רבי ישמעאל תוספת שבת וימים טובים קריינין הוא בין לפניה בין לאחריה, כמו שמשמע דתשבתו שבתכם, מרבה בין לפניה בין לאחריה, תוספת שבת ויום כיפורים דאורייתא, כי כך עתי שפיר שמתפלל שבת בערב שבת. Now, so this argument refers to the previous argument we analyzed last week, right? The machloket over here, where Tosfot here say that Shabbos, Yontiv, Yom Kippur, it's all Doraisa, right? There's the Rosh says it's Doraisa. The Meiri says no, it's Drabanan. So it says those are wait. According to the Meiri, this doesn't work. How can you make Kiddush on Friday if it's not really Shabbos? If it's only Shabbos midrabanan, how can you make Kiddush then? That's the Zarua's question, and the answer is no. So Tosfot is right. The Meiri is wrong. Again, it's not only the Meiri. Any Rishon who doesn't think that Tosefet Shabbat is Doraisa must think that this is incorrect, right? This doesn't work for him. Is what I'm saying. This will only work if you think Tosefet Shabbat is Doraisa. Now, is that necessarily true? What did the Rambam say? According to those who say that the Rambam says that it's Drabanan. According to the Rambam, if we take the Magid Mishnah and the Kesef Mishnah, who say that only Tosefet of fasting on Yom Kippur is the only thing that's Doraisa. According to the Rambam, how could you make Kiddush on Friday? It's not really Shabbos. So the answer is what Yaakov said. I was waiting for Yaakov to say the answer because he said it last week already without realizing what he's saying. I mean, I'm sure you realize what he was saying. He just didn't realize the impact it's going to have on the next year as well. The Rambam is answering a different question. What question is the Rambam answering? The Magid Mishnah, because of Mishnah, when they answered the question, when they explained the Rambam, what question are they answering? Must you add time? But the relevant question when you want to ask, could you yotze davening and kiddush, making birkot mekadesh Shabbat that they have to say on Friday? What's the relevant question? New doctor? May you. Right? And that's a different question. And that's what the Netziv says about this, but I think it's a fairly obvious point. The Netziv here says, I'll say something about the rest of the Netziv in a moment. Now, the Netziv has a problem. So the Netziv, I'll say, the Netziv says what's fairly obvious, which is you must say, according to Kulei Alma, that you're able to sanctify part of Friday in the sanctity of Shabbos. Le'inyan, making Kiddush and saying the prayer and reciting the bracha of Mekadesh Shabbat. You have to be able to do that on Friday because it says that in the Gemara. There's no way around that. The question is, where does it come from? Right? Because again, boom, we're back to the beginning. Tosfot, at least the Or Zarua, connects these two and says, this Gemara that's discussing whether Tosefet Shabbat, how Chol Kodesh Minalan, is answering both questions. It's saying, may you and must you, and if one doesn't do, and if you don't have to, you can't do it either. There's no source for the possibility of doing it either. That's what Tosfot seems to say, at least according to the Or Zarua. The Netziv says, well, the Gemara here, as we said, according to the Rambam, the Gemara is asking, do you need to add time to Shabbos and Yom Tov, etc.? The Rambam says, well, the Rambam says Shabbos, the Rambam says, according to the Magid Mishnah, Kesef Mishnah, the Rambam says you only have to have Tosefet Ta'anit. Nothing else, says the Kesef Mishnah. Says the Miri, well, they're Drabanans. Chol Drabanan. You have to add time for Shabbos and Drabanan. Fine. But here's the question. May you add? The answer is yeah, it's explicit in the Gemara. Okay. It's explicit in the Gemara that you can, but what's the source for that? Where does the Gemara teach us that? So here, the Netziv says an amazing thing that I Baruch Shekivanti from a very different angle. And there's more of a drasha for Sfirat HaOmer and Shavuot.
Can I ask a question before the drasha?
Sure.
Why can't you just say that? Sorry if I'm making a silly mistake here, but why can't you just say that the Rambam explains that our Gemara exactly was asking that question, may you? And then the answer is yes. And he didn't paskin anything special because he didn't think you have to.
Wait, but what? But hold on. The Rambam's
in other words, right now we have a weird.
Yeah. First, let's read the Rambam. The Rambam says, "Tzarich l'osiv mechol kodesh." Is the Rambam answering may you, or is the Rambam saying must you?
There, he thinks you must.
And then what's his source?
Maybe the Gemara.
Now you agree his sources are Gemara, right?
Beseder. But what if the Rambam read the Gemara as a whole as asking the question of may you?
Okay.
And then that Beseder.
You must Yom Kippur and then Shabbatot Minayit Ulamat Ishbetu that you may. It seems to be a bit of a leap. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm saying, right, he paskins Rabbi Shmuel. He says Rabbi Shmuel's limud of Batisha b'chodesh be'erev means you can add time to Shabbat. You must, add time to fasting on Yom Kippur. As the Gemara Shabbatot Minayin Tel Ulamat Ishbotu. Says the Meiri, that must be a limud Rabbanan because the Rambam doesn't mention it. Now says Yaakov, no, the Rambam's learning here. Shabbatchem is a limud that's a hekesh from Shabbat Yom Kippur. Just reminding us, yes? So it says, but we
have a problem with the...
So the Hekesh is between B'Tisha B'Chodesh Be'erev to Tishb'u Shabbatchem, which is Shabbos. So if the answer about Yom Kippur is, must you, to then say that when Shabbat, the pasuk may you, it's a bit of a leap. You see the problem?
I do, but don't forget that the anyways we have a problem with the Rambam and this Gemara, because in any case our Gemara equated Yom Kippur and Shabbat seemingly, and the Rambam doesn't. And if the Rambam doesn't have Tosefet at all for Shabbat as a chovah, not even midrabanan, which is maybe the simpler explanation, then like it's really hard to understand how what he did with this Gemara. So, but rather than say that he just
look for the Girsai and the Gemara that omits this whole part, right?
Right. So, but rather than say that the Rambam just ignored the last line of the Gemara, why not say that the Gemara here is talking about the possibility of Tosefet, and for whatever reasons, Rambam thought that Yom Kippur has like an added status of needing to. But that way, at least you give meaning to this Gemara, according to the Rambam.
Right, I hear. Seder, you're saying instead of creating a new limud that no one's ever heard of, which is what the Netziv is about to do, right? Why go there when you can do something much more simple and just say the Rambam read the Gemara in a more complicated way? Okay, fine. Yeah. Right. Seder. So, all right, so Yaakov is proposing that we say the Rambam read this part of the Gemara, and instead of turning this part of the Gemara into a complete asmachta, say no, this Gemara is telling us, this part of the Gemara is telling us there is a way of adding time to Shabbos. It's possible. And then instead of omitting that part, which seems to be the Kesef Mishnah's way of learning this Gemara, the Rambam saying, here we learn something else. Maybe it's a bit more of an asmachta, but the asmachta that really does teach me din doraisa that says that you could add time to Shabbos. The Netziv says something that actually is that I actually said misvarativ in a very different place, and that is the question of tmimot on Shavuot. This always bothered me, right? I think it's the Taz who started this trouble, who said you have to you can't do Shavuot early, right? Why not? Why can't you have early Shavuos? You can have early Shabbos, you can have early Yom Kippur, you can have early Yom Tiv. Why can't you have early Shavuos? Someone asked me this year, Corona, someone asked, can you have early Rosh Hashanah? I said, sure. Like you can daven Ma'ariv and make Kiddush early on Rosh Hashanah. Pesach has its own special din because of whatever, but why not Shavuot?
Because Shavuot is Shavuot Mimot Tiana. So it's the idea of a full or a complete 49 before you enter Shavuot.
Right. So I never understood. So I think that Rav Baruch is way ahead of me, because I thought about this for a very long time until I realized the simplicity of what he said, and I want to elaborate on that a bit. It always bothered me that
I think you can enter Shavuot early. Even so, for the same reasons that you're allowed Tosefet Yom Tov. Not allowed, but
you say you can. So here's the thing. So here's the interesting thing. It always bothered me that they say Tmimot. So I always thought, well, the day is going to end eventually. Whether I'm there or not, the day is going to end at some point. I counted the 49th day, right? And now, eventually, the day is going to end. The day doesn't need my help to end. What does this mean? That I have to end the day? I have to end the day before such a... What does that even mean? Until I realized I'm reading the whole thing upside down. I'm reading it backwards. When the world was created, every single seventh day of the, right, when Shabbat was created, every seventh day since then, Kviyah V'Kaima will be Shabbat, right? When we Mekadesh the Chodesh, Kviyah V'Kaima, when we Mekadesh, we're Mevarech Chodesh Nisan, we kovea that it's Rosh Chodesh Nisan on Thursday, so Mela Pesach will be Thursday 2 weeks later. That's the way it works. And Pesach becomes Thursday 2 weeks later already on Rosh Chodesh, when we decide it's Rosh Chodesh. Right? That's the way it always works. Every 7th day is Shabbat, so every 6th day you can say, now I'm starting Shabbos a bit earlier because Shabbat is already waiting for me at the other end of the Shkia. At the other end of the Shkia, I have Shabbos waiting for me. So I can come a bit early and show up half an hour before that Shkia. Right? Same goes for Pesach, for Yom Kippur. When I Mekadesh Rosh Hashanah, I Mekadesh the month of Tishrei. So 10 days later, it will be Yom Kippur. Mimela, half an hour before that, I could say, I'm coming in advance, right? I'm showing up in advance to Yom Kippur, which is already waiting for me at the other end of the Shkia. Regarding Shavuot, it's not so. Regarding Shavuot becomes when the 49th day ends because nothing else turns it into Shavuot except for the ending of the 49th day. Mimela says the Netziv, I can prove this not only from the idea of Tmimot and the idea of the Sphira, but also from another place. If I can just find the Netziv, I can show you where that's from. It's over here. מדכתיב בחג שבועות וקראתם בעצם היום הזה למעוטי מבעוד יום, שמע מינה בכל שבת ויום טוב אפשר לקדש מבעוד יום נמי, ומתחיל החיוב מבעוד יום, as opposed to on Shavuot, which you can't. There's no early Shavuot because Shavuot isn't waiting for you at the other end. And that's why it says in the Pasuk, to set this, to drive this idea home, it says in the Pasuk, קראתם בעצם היום הזה, to tell you on this day, but not any other day, not earlier, not on the 9th, as opposed to Yom Kippur, which could begin on the 9th. Oh, yes, sorry. Sorry, Bill, accept that.
To put it in a different way, you're saying that Shabbat is what we'll call cosmic time. It happens one way or another. Shavuot, and I'll say Yom Tov in general, is determined by us because, and as we say in the bracha, Mekadesh Yisrael behazmanim, that we're the ones who determine that. And so Shavuot, though, depends on something outside of us, you're saying. Right.
Now, there's still a difference between other Yantivs and Shavuot, because other Yantivs, when I Mekadesh the Chodesh, right? Mekadesh Yisrael v'hazmanim, Yisrael shemekadshim et hazmanim, I'm the one who determines when is Rosh Chodesh. Once I determine Rosh Chodesh Nisan, Pesach is already set. It's not so about Shavuot. That's the point. When it comes to Shavuot, it's set by us, by our actual counting. Therefore, so the important thing here is not Shavuot. The important thing is what's the punkt fakert, right? The other side is the Shabbos and Yantiv, says the Netziv. You're able to add time. The fact that Shavuot needs to be so emphasized, right? Both on the end of Tmimot, on the aspect, the Tmimot aspect, and Katem Be'etzem Hayom Hazeh to tell us on Shavuot it works like this, not on Shabbos. On Shabbos you could accept it early. Now, I agree with Yaakov that the Netziv is very mechudash, and you don't necessarily have to go that far to bring a raya that you could add time to Shabbat. It's an astonishing limud, very interesting regarding Shavuot. The Netziv went this far, so I just want to show the two aspects here. One is the Or Zarua, who explains in Tosfot's Shita, and says the Gemara is really referring to both the chiyuv and the ability. And that's why in Tosfot Shita, I'm learning the Gemara as follows. The Gemara asks, how do we know that you have to add time? Since you have to add time, you're able to add time, right? If there was no significance of making Kiddush on Friday, it wouldn't mean anything adding time to Shabbos. It didn't mean anything. And that's why since you must, it also means something, and therefore not only can you do it half an hour before, you can do it an hour before. That's what Tosfot reads the Gemara. the Netziv, the extreme Netziv in the Rambam says, I need a totally different source for this. Now, as Yaakov said, I don't know if you necessarily have to bring a totally different source, but what's clear is that the Netziv at least is learning the Rambam's pshat in the Gemara is, must you add time? Setu. That's it. Nothing else. Right? The question of how do I know that you're able to add time? What?
Sorry, finish.
How do I know that I'm able to add time? Well, the Netziv goes to extreme and proves it from Shavuot Bichlal. But I agree with Yaakov that I don't know if you have to go that far, but what's clear is that everyone will agree that you're able to add time to Shabbat. The whole question, the whole first part of the shiur we had last week, the whole issue we discussed over here is a D'oraisa or Drabanan in the first couple of pages, right? I'm not reading through them, I'm just showing. First couple of pages that discussed is a D'oraisa or Drabanan. All of this is referring to the question of must you? May you? Gemara Berachot Kaf Zayin clearly says that you definitely may. So that's that point about that.